Okay, welcome to our presentation. The title of this presentation is Plan, Do, Study, Act, Utilizing Improvement Science Methods to Identify and Dismantle Systemic Inequalities in Teacher Education Admissions and Recruitment. We're all from Humboldt State University. My name is Heather Ballinger. I'm the Secondary Education Program Leader, and joining me today is Sarah Green, our Secondary and Elementary Program Coordinator. I have Dr. Libbi Miller. She is the Department Chair for the School of Education, and Dr. James Woglom, who is the Elementary Education Program Leader.
Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Green. Our problem statement when we started this look into our recruitment and study is that teacher candidates of color have a lower application rate, admission, and enrollment rate into our post-baccalaureate elementary education and secondary education program than white teacher candidates. Next slide, please. The aim statement that we developed is by August 2020, we will improve enrollment from 24%, which is about 10 out of 41 candidates, to 35%, which is approximately 14 out of 41 candidates, of teacher candidates that self-identify as students of color, including both online and in-person cohorts. Our first driver diagram that we created, we took a look at different issues that we think cause our problem statement. So we first looked at recruitment, pathways, and the application process as things that we could control, and then relocation, equity, inclusion, and resources as kind of secondary drivers. We decided to look at application process deeper, looking at our application across both programs and seeing how we can make it more equitable for students of color, as well as the different pathway programs that HSU offers through undergraduate pathways, and our recruitment. So we looked at the top three items to see what we could change to be more equitable.
So following looking at that fishbone document that Sarah just presented, we had the opportunity to kind of take a lot of those ideas or theories of why equity might not be being achieved at our campus, and then we determined what we thought were some of our main drivers, the main issues that were keeping us from achieving our goals and our aims, and thought about how we might act on those. So we specifically looked at our program structure and saw some potential inequities there in terms of when classes were offered and so forth, and looked at our application and thought about how that application process specifically might have some exclusive factors to it, how our outreach and recruitment might not be as inclusive as it could possibly be, thinking about program requirements and how they might be sort of stumbling blocks, and financing and how financing for programs can be potentially an exclusive factor as well. We then mapped a lot of those ideas to our understanding of how our application process worked. So we looked specifically at admissions and thought about how we are conducting admissions, and then put a lot of thought into how we might experiment with that process such that we opened up concerns of equity in each of them. So for instance, we thought about our interview questions. If you look kind of towards the center of our process here, and the PDSA pointing to schedule interviews, we thought about what are the questions we were asking our potential candidates, and how might they be potentially exclusive or off-putting or indicative of potential understandings of intent that might be concerning the students.
Okay, Part of the improvement science process is the plan, do, study, act process. So we call the PSDA cycle. And so in this image here, we've kind of put a picture of this idea of thinking about ways to quickly test out and try changes. So we call that the low-hanging fruit. Some examples of that related to this study that we did was trying to recruit students of color by specifically targeting outreach. So one idea that we had was we made phone calls to candidates that were in process during the application cycle to make sure to call them, check in if they had questions. Some of them we text messaged just to see if they were had additional questions or anything like that. And so that kind of contrasted with some other really, that was like kind of a low investment, and it was really quickly to do, as opposed to some other things that we've done in the past that were kind of high leverage points in terms of investing a lot of money and time into a big recruitment event. And so we were kind of testing the differences between those two ideas, and we've continued this sort of PSDA cycle throughout the research process.
Thanks, Heather. So that we engaged in a number of PSDA cycles, as Jim pointed out in our process map, and we track those throughout our application cycle. And our goal was to try to test small ideas of change and to learn as quickly as possible. And then after one cycle of testing, to make a decision whether we wanted to abandon our idea of change, let's get rid of it, adjust it by making a small change and trying something else, or adopt it as is. And with that one PSDA cycle easily leads into another PSDA cycle. So we start with one, we text message 5 minutes. We see if we get any response, we see if they complete their application, and then we go back and reflect. Do we want to adopt this? Do we want to adjust, or do we want to abandon it? And then we move forward to our next PSDA cycle, ramping up until we really solidify our theory of change into something that is reliable and produce the results that we want. So here's an example from a PSDA cycle that we have recently completed. This is doing on-campus recruitment to undergraduates in our undergraduate teacher education pathway programs, such as history education, art education, music education. We identified these pathways early on as a high leverage point for recruitment of candidates of color, because our demographics at Humboldt State look very different in our undergraduate student population than our post-bac and graduate student population. We are a Hispanic serving institution and a minority majority institution in our undergraduate population, but those aren't the same demographics that we see in our post-bac population. So we started with a very small test. We started by reaching out to our partners, to our undergraduate pathway partners across campus, and asking them if they would let us come to their class to talk about becoming a teacher. We looked at those results. Most, all but one, invited us into their classrooms, which was really exciting. And so we ramped up. Our next was that we started with presentations, and each one of us did a presentation on how you get into the credential program. We gathered data with a student interest sheet to see how many of the students we presented to were interested. We analyzed those results. One thing that we noticed was that presenting the application process to candidates, to students, was really overwhelming. And I really even remember watching students' faces as we go through the long list of program requirements, which we all know is lengthy, going, oh, I don't know if I can do this. So we adjusted, and we switched our presentation to be 10 reasons you want to be a teacher. Jim took on the first presentation in that format, and we saw a lot more interest, a lot more excitement just about becoming a teacher. Then we ramped up, and working with our Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions grant, this led to this teacher pathway mini conference that was done with support of the grant, where we saw, I think, how many? Almost 50 students, 45 or 50 undergraduate students showing up, sharing their interest in teaching, and a lot of excitement generated about teaching, and a lot of connections with our post-bac program and our undergraduate teacher pathway programs. Throughout our application cycle this year, one thing that we engaged in to better understand our process and in this system investigation mode was to track our admissions data. So just about every month throughout our application cycle, which starts in October and ends in February, it was extended another month based on data to increase enrollment. We tracked who was applying, how many students were applying, who was completing the application process, and monitored to see if we were meeting our goal. One thing we noticed that throughout this process is that we had a really large number of in-progress applicants. And even at the very end, on that March 4th date, we still see that we have over 40 in-progress applicants. We don't know where they were in the application process. We don't have a lot of information on them. But as we move forward, this is a target population that we may look into engaging in further PSDA cycles. And I'll turn it back over to Heather, who's being Zoom bombed.
That's my son in the background doing online school, because that's our reality right now. So anyways, moving into future aim statements for our next application season, which will begin next month in October, is we want to continue to improve on this enrollment goal of 35%. And we originally started with our secondary education program, and we're hoping to involve our elementary education cohorts as well. Again, this 35% matching the student enrollment of Eureka City Schools, which is our biggest district within Humboldt County. So thanks again for watching our presentation, and thanks again to my colleagues for showing up, including Teddy in the background here, and I think that's all we have to share, right?